Hi, welcome to Psych Waves. This is Dr. Teresa Anderson. I am coming live to you from Cincinnati, Ohio, the Anderson Clinic. We talk about all things new and upcoming in the psychiatric world and trying to decrease the stigma of mental health treatment. And with me today is a special guest, Officer Chris Perry. And I am so excited for you guys to hear his story because it is near and dear to my heart as a first responder. And these guys have always been close to my heart, and as well as the military. My thought is if those guys can't take care of themselves, there's no way that they can take care of us in dire situations. So I really, 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 really love the idea of getting first responders the help that they need. So, Officer Chris, tell me a little bit about your background and what we're going to chat about today, which is a lot about PTSD.
So I grew up a police officer's son. My dad was a canine officer for Cincinnati Police Department. My best friend growing up was a police canine, a German Shepherd named Sarge. From my earliest memory, I was surrounded by law enforcement. I would sit in my dad's car when I was 4 years old. My responsibility was take the dog and get him ready for work and make sure he had water and put him in the car. And um, it was a really
It's in your
it was
blood.
a really cool way to grow up. I wouldn't change anything about it, but I will say, was it normal? No, it was not normal. May 5th of 1979 was the first line of duty death I experienced. Granted, I was 6, but I saw the effects, and it changed how I looked at the world on that day. May 5th of 79 is a date that will never leave my brain. I imagine if you ask most 6-year-old kids if there was a specific date that stayed with them their entire life, they would say no.
Not unless it was their birthday, I'm sure.
Right. So that just happened to be my dad's birthday, and it also happened to be Kentucky Derby Day. Well, having a family that's all from Kentucky, it's a big day. So it was a big day for the Derby, my dad's birthday, and then, it was the day that Cincinnati police officer Mel Hensey was killed. And I never looked at the world the same. Um, my dad worked 8 at night till 4 in the morning as a canine officer. When he would go down the street in his cruiser, I would always ask him to turn his lights on at the top of the hill. And I don't know, I don't think he ever realized why I was doing that, but it was like him saying goodbye. And then I would worry that he wasn't going to come home in the morning because of what happened to Officer Hensey. So I would wake up sometimes at 4 o'clock in the morning and look out in the driveway and see if there was a car there. When there wasn't, if he had a late track or something like that, then it was panic time. So that's how I grew up. It wasn't a bad childhood. I was extremely proud of my dad. Went to court with my dad. My mom worked too because back then police officer salaries weren't great. So mom and dad both working. I attended court with my dad. I met the
Must be a
judge.
little more realistic than most children live, is my understanding.
Yeah, I was like a junior police officer like my whole life, right? So I got to see how it all worked, the personalities, the culture, and those guys were my heroes. And so much so that when I was a little kid, I thought that they were like legitimately superheroes. Like I didn't think they could get sick, they couldn't get hurt, and then boy, did I find out different. You know, it was the only thing that I ever wanted to do, and I had told people all while I was growing up, this is what I'm going to do, this is what I'm going to do. And when that day came, I gave it 100%. I've given it 100% my entire career. And the mistakes that I made were not making myself priority number one. And I learned
Say that again, please. Say that
I
again.
made a horrible mistake by not prioritizing myself. I have to be the most important person in the picture and take care of myself first. My job should not come first. I should come first because if I am not 100%, I cannot help anybody else. I'm not going to be a good husband. I'm not going to be a good son. I'm not going to be a good coworker. And it, just so when I say that to people, sometimes they look at it and they say, "Well, that's really selfish." No, it's not. It's selflessly selfish.
One of my favorite
Because
sayings to my patients is you can't pour from an empty cup.
no,
Yeah.
And you have got to prioritize yourself to benefit other people. And like I said, some people look at it and they're like, well, that's really self-centered or selfish. It's not, because your ultimate goal is to give your best to other people. So that's why you make yourself priority number one. I failed to do that, and um, ended up in a horrible spot with undiagnosed PTSD for 22 years. So upon that diagnosis, then everything turned for the better. And I am a big advocate for uh, any kind of mental health issues, especially PTSD, because it's nearest to my heart. It's something that I've seen so many people that I've worked with over the years suffer with.
So tell me a little bit about your journey in terms of what was going on in your career that kind of led you down the road of realizing that you needed some help.
So it started like anybody's like young career, really. I came out of the gate wanting to do the best job that I could possibly do. I was extremely active. I put myself in positions where I could get hurt, and I did. Um, the one night that was probably I would say, the start of, I guess, my struggle, my downfall, whatever you want to call it, is I was assaulted. I was on duty. I was assaulted by 4 to 5 people. I was struck in the head with a bottle. They ripped my vest off, tried getting my gun, stomped
Oh
me,
my God.
kicked me. I survived that, and I will always credit my upbringing to my ability to survive that, because I was just brought up that you never quit. You don't quit. You put pain aside, deal with what you have to deal with, fight through it at all costs. And that's the way I played sports, and it ended up saving my life multiple times. But that one incident was the first time that I looked around and I thought, this is as real as it gets. When you're at that moment when you know that if you let up the tiniest bit, you're not going home. That's over. I got a hit in the head right here with the bottle. Um, I got 12 staples in my head, a bad concussion. I got a permanent crease in the top of my skull. Um, Fought back from that. Lost a coworker in a line of duty death, and lost another coworker in another situation, line of duty thing. Not to mention all the traumas you face on a daily basis that you get so hardened to that you don't realize that they had an impact on you. And the saying back then, I started in the early to mid 90s, was something bad happens, some traumatic event happens, suck it up, push through it, or go have a drink. And none of those are helpful, none of them. But we weren't encouraged to address it or talk about it. It's just part of the job. And that rang in my ears throughout my whole recovery, was it's just part of the job. It's just part of the
Suck it
job.
up, buttercup, right?
Right. Because that just part of the job is why I never really knew that anything was not right with me. I thought this is just how we are,
It's what
we're
everybody
just
else has to go through, and everybody else is going
right.
through the same thing. So, yeah.
So the world is just a dark place. I'm just grumpy all the time. It's normal only to sleep for 3 hours a day, you know? And you run at that level and you have no idea the damage that it's doing to you. It got me to a place where I wasn't so much, I would say, overtly suicidal, but I lost the ability to have fear and to feel pain. And people have called me on that before, and they're like, well, that's not possible. No, it most definitely is. And I can tell you from my own personal experiences, it is. I would go on emergency runs for an officer needs assistance. And I remember one specific incident. An officer was on a traffic stop. Gunfire was exchanged. It was raining. I was on a motorcycle, and I was passing police cars on the way on two wheels. And I was looking at them as I passed them like, why aren't you guys going any faster? Well, conditions were terrible, but I didn't fear what could happen. It wasn't a thing. It wasn't even on my radar. My only priority was getting to that officer.
As if you got hurt or died, it wouldn't matter.
It didn't matter because I wasn't afraid of it. You know, when you lack fear,
You're
what?
dangerous.
Yeah, right. There's nothing that I feared. I didn't fear anything. I didn't fear injury. I didn't feel death. That led to 10 surgeries. Um, I didn't feel pain, so there was no reason to be cautious. I couldn't feel any kind of healthy emotion. I couldn't feel an adrenaline dump. So then I started road racing motorcycles as a hobby. When you have no fear at all and no concern for your own safety, road racing motorcycles at well over 100 miles an hour is a bad, bad recipe. Multiple crashes. When I broke all my ribs on the right side, um, I multiple concussions. I would say, realistically, I'm probably around 14 concussions now. Two of those I was unconscious for a while with, um, but then I reverted back to that don't quit, don't give up, you got to push through it. I raced my final race of the season. I was in the running for a high spot, possibly a win in a national championship when I was a novice. I'd broken my ribs in Michigan. The end season race was at Road Atlanta in Georgia, and I showed up to race that race with broken ribs on my right side. And I raced through it, and I got third. And guess what? It wasn't good enough. Any win that I ever had, any success I ever had, it wasn't good enough. I could have done better. I could have set a faster lap time. If I won a race, then I would just tear it apart and say, well, yeah, I could have probably ran faster laps. I should have passed more people. I should have done this, should have done that. And when you came across the finish line, took the checkered flag, it probably felt good for 3 or 4 minutes, and then it was gone.
So I have to ask you, a lot of folks in your position, like if for instance, we hear it all the time with folks who abuse alcohol, there comes a bottom of the barrel moment, right? Like a cannot pass go, things will change forever, crossroads. What was yours?
There almost were several in
Okay.
different aspects. One was, since I was 4 years old, I was consumed by motorcycles. I loved motorcycles. My mom and dad tried to keep me off of them. Um, it didn't work very well. I turned 18, started riding. I became a police motorcycle officer. I road raced motorcycles. Now I race dirt track motorcycles. Riding on the street was a passion. And when I noticed that there was something going on, and I didn't see it myself, but a neighbor of mine, he asked me, he said, I don't see you going for a ride anymore. Is everything okay? And I said, yeah, I like to work on them now. Because I knew where I was going with that was going to lead me down a bad road, but I didn't really know how to counter that. And I would take chances, and I'm not saying that I ever endangered anybody else. I would be in rural areas or in the mountains, and I didn't do anything, I would say, like purposely reckless, but I didn't take into any consideration as to what would happen if I crashed. And I'm in some remote areas down in Virginia. I'm by myself. If something would have happened, it would have been over.
I think
And
I think during one point of our conversations you'd mentioned something about your wife had said something to you as well, like she was getting fearful to the point you weren't like going to come back and somehow you'd be okay with that.
yeah, so with that, there was a really good friend of mine that I rode with quite a bit on the street, and I would always kind of restrain myself when I rode with him because I love him like a brother, and he's been a great friend. I didn't realize how bad I was, and this statement that I made is something that still sticks with me as a reminder. Um, we got off work, and he said, "Hey, do you want to go for a ride?" And I said, "Sure, that sounds great." I said, "But I want to go home and take a shower first." And he said, "Why would you have to take a shower first?" Because it was like a really hot summer day, and like we're already sweaty. He's like, "Why would you have to take a shower first?" And I said, "Because I don't want to die dirty. I like to take a shower before I ride." So I was fully prepared not to come back. And I didn't, it wasn't a concern if I didn't come back. It was just something that could happen. So that was that whole inability to feel fear, pain, anything. I couldn't feel any emotion. I could feel rage pretty well, but no healthy emotion. Um, and my wife would see me race, and she would just shake her head. And I had one crash in Nashville where I was unconscious, went to the infield care center. Um, I came to, they asked me who I was there with, and I said a girl with brown hair. Didn't know her name. So she shows up into you know, the emergency room. They're asking me, is this the girl with brown hair? And she's like, you don't know my name? And I didn't. But didn't stop. Kept doing what I was doing and just running myself into the ground. And I would say probably the bottom of the barrel moment was when my mom passed away from dementia. I was in hospice, laying in a chair next to her bed. My dad was in there too. We would stay the night shift with her. And I left there in the morning, and I didn't have the ability to feel sad. That's horrible, because you should. But like everything else in my life at that time,
No doubt.
it was just a thing. It's just part of life. It's just what happens, because that's what I kept telling myself. All of this is just part of life. This is just part of life. Everybody lives like this. Every police officer, first responder feels this way. Completely abnormal, and completely unhealthy. And I will tell you that my professional life, I managed it very well. I wore a mask. My personal life was a train wreck. I was so exhausted from trying to be the professional that I needed to be that my personal life crumbled. Um, just day upon day where you had not the energy to get out of bed. Um, I wasn't a good friend. I wasn't a good husband. The reason I wasn't a good husband was because I wasn't present. Family
You were
events.
physically present, you weren't emotionally present.
Yeah, I could have been 1,000 miles away. Um, Definitely not the life of the party. Very negative. Everything about the world was terrible because that's the world that I lived in. So that was my reality. Um,
So what kind of help
it's
did you get?
so I went. So how this all started is because of an incredible uh, lady named Tiffany Galvez from Cincinnati Police Department. She gave a survey. It was an overall mental health survey. Um, Cops and other first responders very rarely will take a survey, and very rarely will they answer it honestly. And I did both of those. And I talked to a girl that was in front of me, and I said, "Are you going to answer this honestly?" And she said, "Yeah, but I'm afraid somebody will come and get us, when the survey comes back." And we laughed about it because there's that dark humor. And
They were just like getting your department baseline, and you guys were like, "Ooh, this is not
right,
good."
yeah. So I knew I wasn't good. I knew I wasn't good, but I always told people I was good, right? Results come back and say you're at a high risk for suicide. You need to contact the UC Stress Center in Cincinnati. I did. I made an appointment. I went and got diagnosed with PTSD. That was kind of a bitter pill to swallow, but I knew that they weren't wrong. So in comes the mindset to push through in a healthy way. What do I have to do to beat this? What's it going to look like? What's my time frame? Well, I made it out the other side in 6 visits. I've never worked harder at anything in my entire life. I made myself as vulnerable as I could possibly be because I saw a light at the end of the tunnel and I knew I could get to it. And I wanted to be who I always should have been. And I will tell you that now at this stage in my life, I'm better than I've ever been from birth, and I get confirmation for that all the time. I volunteer with the Alzheimer's Association, and I went and did a panel discussion for a meeting that they had. I came home. My dad had showed up to take care of my dog while I was gone. My wife was out of town. I sit down. My dad's like, "What were you doing today that you were working out of state?" And I said, "Well, I was doing this thing for the Alzheimer's Association." He's like, "When did you start doing that?" And I said, like just about 8 or 9 months ago. And he's like, "This isn't like you. This isn't. You were never like this." And I said, "Dad," and I kept this from my dad because we're both cops, and it's not something we ever talked about because the stigma is so strong. And I kept it from him. It was one of those things I kind of resigned myself to the fact that we were never going to discuss this. And this was just one of those things that I was going to have to work through for the rest of my life. I thought I will never be able to tell him this, and one day he won't be here and I won't have the ability. By some strange turn of events, my dad says, well, tell me about it. And I said, well, Dad, I said, buckle up because here's the whole story that I've been keeping from you forever. So we talked about it. Both of us got tears in our eyes, and he agreed with me about all the stuff that first responders go through, and that his statement was, there's nobody that does this job the right way that will come through this unscathed. You're going to have scars, whether they're physical, mental, or both. And I have both. It was incredible for me to feel that feeling of being able to tell my dad and to have him agree with me, because I thought he was going to be ashamed of me and embarrassed. But he felt it too. But his generation, he started in 1964. He's retired now, but that generation never addressed anything.
Of course not. Pull yourself up by your bootstraps and keep going, right?
Right. So, like, my generation, I'll be 52 in 2 days. My generation, we didn't accept it either. We didn't talk about it. Now we are. So we're on the front lines. My generation, Gen X is on the front lines of this whole, and I don't like to really call it a movement, but what else do you call it?
Yeah, it really is, because I think, and that's part of the idea behind the healing power of psychotherapy, right? To be able to have another human being bear witness to your pain and not judge you, and in some cases, like your dad, also acknowledge and validate the fact that, yeah, I've been there and it sucks. It's awful and I get it, and you're not alone in this, and you've never been alone. You just never realized that you weren't.
Right. And I've seen just so many careers and families get destroyed over the years from this. And what was it called? It was called that. That's just how our profession is. It's the culture. Divorce. Your kids not liking you, having no relationship with your kids,
Alcohol,
broken
drug
families,
use. Yeah.
alcohol, drug use. Just it's like it was the dirty little secret, and I refuse to let that remain a dirty little secret. This PTSD nearly killed me.
On several occasions.
Right, and I did a podcast with two other therapists. They're good friends of mine, and they said that people come up to them and say, after they listen to the podcast, they'll say, "Is that guy a cat? How many lives does he have?" And they're like, "No, cats have 9 lives. Chris Perry has far more than that," and it's true, and I know why my life was spared, because I'm here doing this work now. So everything that I've gone through and experienced got me where I am today. If I didn't have those terrible experiences, I wouldn't be here. And this right now is the best time of my life. I've never done work like this.
Tell me a
It's
little bit
amazing.
about some of the work that you do with first responders and sort of normalizing the idea of, yeah, we're going through these traumas every single day. We're all going through this, and it's okay to talk about it, and it's okay to get treatment for it. It's okay to feel better. It's okay not to turn to drugs and alcohol, or beating up on your spouse or kids, or beating up the perp that you're chasing, or whatever. How
Right.
how how are you making this more widely known? How are you spreading, for lack of a better term, the good news of getting help and healing?
So I first started speaking at in-service classes for the police department, and then it branched out, other peer support groups, things along those lines, and then I started to build a bit of a reputation for being somebody that could, be the point of change and start talking to people that were struggling. And the first responder community is a pretty guarded community.
Oh yes,
We don't trust a lot of people.
Yeah.
When you have somebody that's open about it, um, disregarding the stigma altogether, and being out with it, I don't have any secrets.
It gives
If you
people
want to ask,
permission to be more open when you do.
Right. So then these doors start opening and people start going through therapy. And then I will walk with them through this. They trust me. They can ask me, what was it like for you? I share my story. And it's everybody's story is different. Everybody's recovery is different. But they have some kind of baseline where they're like, okay, it should go like this, it should go like that, or they get comfortable with it and they're like, well, it worked for him, it can work for me. And I encourage them along the way, and like I said, walk the path with them. And then ultimately, I'll get a call that says, you saved my life. And I will never take credit for quote unquote saving your life. I showed you a path. I walked that path with you, but you had to do the work.
They had to walk it, yeah.
Yeah, nobody saved my life but me, but I couldn't have done it by myself. And that's the thing where people think that you can push through this by yourself. You can't. You don't have the ability to do it. When your brain gets stuck in fight or flight mode, you operate like a machine. Hence the, lack of emotions,
Yeah,
lack of fear,
absolutely.
and
And tell
to
people,
see
go ahead.
to see somebody reborn and rebuilding. I've never experienced anything like that in my life. Like if you start as a young policeman, you're like, I want to make a difference, and everybody says that. And it's kind of a corny thing to say. It's in every TV show and everything. But at the end of a career, which I started another career as a police officer after I retired in February.
Glutton for
You
punishment.
know, I'm sorry.
Glutton for punishment.
Right, right. But I looked at everything and I thought, what did I really do? And I know that I started, looking back through time. I was like, okay, I did this, I did that. But nothing was really tangible, right? So it was kind of an empty feeling, but I still had gas in the tank. And I thought, what can I do? So then I started pushing really hard into all the wellness things. Now I'm working with senior citizens as a senior resource officer with Amberley Village, just outside of Cincinnati. Been given an incredible opportunity here. I've made contacts with seniors that are some of the most emotional, incredible experiences, because seniors are an incredible wealth of knowledge. I mean, that's living history, and it's not going to be here forever. And there's so much wisdom that can be gained from seniors. And it's that intergenerational thing has been gone from our society. Like, I remember as a kid, you took care of the seniors in your area. You cut their grass, you shoveled their driveway. You listen to them talk. They're lonely. Isolation is terrible. Isolation kills you. And I have brought all these things together. And I won't say it's not challenging. It is. But it's a great challenge. I like challenges. Otherwise, I wouldn't have chosen the line of work that I did, and watching seniors have a smile on their face when, say, they're a widow, their kids are out of town, they don't really have anybody to talk to, but then you'll get a text from them that says, hey, I was just checking on you. Would you like to stop by and talk? I don't go over and sit and talk for 2 hours. And I hear their life story and how they're feeling about things today. And, we exchange stories, you build a relationship, and it's where else? I couldn't have this opportunity anywhere else. My goal was not to do this. My goal was to retire. And I say that in my worst parts of PTSD, I wanted out of the police department. I didn't want to have anything else to do with law enforcement. And it sounds ridiculous. It didn't at the time. I wanted to buy a gravel truck and haul gravel from point A to point B. You pay me, I drop your gravel off, and I don't have to talk to anybody, and I can be by myself. And we had a lady that came in, and she was like a career development person, post law enforcement career. And I told her, and I was proud of it, like, this is my plan. And she said, you will never stay with that plan. That's not who you are.
It looks like easy emotional math, but not so much. Yeah.
No, I would have been terribly empty. But like I said, there's this timeline of things that happened that you can't call it a coincidence. I don't believe in coincidences anymore. The right people at the right time put me where I am today, and I am incredibly grateful, and I love each and every one of those people, and I tell them that. And with everything that I've been through, I'm extremely open. I tell people what I think in a good way, not like I used to in a bad way. um, if you love somebody, tell them you love them. If they've done something that really touches your heart, tell them that it did.
Absolutely.
Share that. If you're genuinely concerned for somebody, sit down and talk. Ask the hard questions. Nobody else is going to.
We're not promised any time on this earth. Yeah.
No. So, give your best while making sure that you're in a good place.
I wanted to ask you about the firefighters group that you work with as well, just so we can kind of let our community know that there are options available to them.
So, for some reason, and I'm not 100% sure how it came about, but more firefighters contact me than police officers do. And I know the stigma is stronger with the police, but I've done multiple presentations for firefighters. They're really more receptive, and they're, I don't know, the way they approach it is just smoother. It's like a they'll just talk about it, where you really have to kind of pull it out of police officers.
You're more like a dentist where the police officers are concerned you're yanking.
Right.
Yeah, I've noticed that too.
Yeah, and like what everybody says is, so it's because they're afraid they're going to lose their badge and their gun.
Sure.
And that is a huge part of it. But losing your life and your identity is far more important than losing a job. There are other things that you can do. You can't let this job kill you. It's dangerous enough. It's going to take, what statistics prove that it takes years off of your life. That's not a myth. That's accurate. It damages relationships, everything. It's a very, very stressful job, and firefighting is too. But those guys are with each other all the time, and they have that camaraderie, and they're living together for 24 hours at a time. So there's that, that connection where they can go back to the firehouse and talk about runs if that's where they are. But like with the police, you're running call to call to call, and you go from, a homicide in the middle of the street to a barking dog complaint to, a crash with serious injuries or death, and you just keep going. There's no time to sit and reflect on it. And then you go home, sleep for 3 hours, get up and go to court in the morning, stay in court till noon, come back home, you have a family you have to take care of, and then you got to do it all over again. There's no break.
No time to unpack it.
No, nothing at all. And then you have 30 years of a trauma-filled career come down on top of your head at the end. And one of the misconceptions that I like to dispel with people that are close to retirement is I'll approach them and I'll talk to them and I'll say, look, is there anything you need to address that you've been through in your career? Well, yeah, there's been some things that have haunted me, from the beginning of my career. I've lived with it forever, but it'll all be good when I go to Florida or when I retire to Tennessee or when I retire to my lake house. And to us, that seems completely rational. And I'll tell them, you realize this isn't geographical. This isn't here. It's in your head, and it's going to come with you, and it's going to stay with you for the rest of your life. So let's deal with it now, so you can enjoy your retirement, so you can be the grandpa that you need to be, the grandpa that's present, and that enjoys fishing with grandkids, things like that. And a lot of people get it, and they get it a lot more than I thought they would, and that's really encouraging.
My freshman year at university, we were all in orientation week given a Dr. Seuss book. It's Old Places You'll Go.
I had the same one.
I would make an addendum to that and you take your crap with you.
Yeah.
You're like you said, it's not geographic. It's with you. It's stuck to you unless you can get it out.
Yeah. And you can do with it what you choose. It can be a negative or a positive. It's up to you to decide. But a lot of times getting that in those proper segments, you need help doing it.
So if we have any first responders out there listening, as a friend, as a colleague, as a coworker, what can we do to help a person that we see as obviously in need?
Ask the hard question. And the number one thing that, an indicator for me, was I had this standard that I held for my work, and then I could see it decline, and I couldn't put the brakes on it, and I started taking off sick just because I couldn't do it. I had nothing left. I was completely exhausted, just trying to maintain. Work performance suffered. I became just, I didn't have any desire for law enforcement anymore. I didn't want to do anything. All I wanted to do was try and sleep, and I couldn't really sleep. Like I said, 3 hours was my standard for, almost a quarter of a century.
Your poor brain.
Right. And then add in multiple head traumas, and then PTSD on top of it. When you really look at it that way, it is a miracle that I'm still here. And I thank God for that. And if people have a problem with faith, then so be it. But that's been a huge part for me.
So when you say ask the hard question,
Are you
something
going
along the lines of, I see you deteriorating, I see what's going on, I'm worried about you, what can I do to help?
Yeah. Like I've noticed you're not the same person that you always were. When we go on runs together, you're not present. Like your skills look like they're slipping. And I noticed it even in my shooting when I go to the target range. And I tried to dismiss it as, oh, I'm getting older, my eyes aren't as good. I just didn't have the ability to perform at the level that I did. And it wasn't because I was getting old. It was because I was exhausted. And ask those questions. You see somebody and they're not who they used to be, ask the questions, and do it in private. Don't front somebody out in a roll call room, but meet with them and say, look, you don't seem like yourself. Is there anything you want to talk about? And if it gets in a really dark place, say, are you thinking about killing yourself? Don't say anything like, you're not going to do anything stupid, are you? That's the worst thing you could possibly say. Because now there's shame attached to it.
Exactly.
And now it's like this, you've given the stigma a boost. Let's boost the stigma because now this means you're stupid or you're selfish or you're a bad person. There's this PTSD, mental illness, it affects every segment of our society. You look at kids that grow up in violent areas. So that was one of the things, I think I've told you about this before, but I was doing a community event years ago. And it was a happy thing, there was different groups of first responders, families that are all grilling out, and the music's playing, and the kids are playing games, and everything's great. And then these, like, 5 little boys, they were probably all under 6 years old, walk over to me, and they're looking at my equipment, looking at my motorcycle, and then they said, hey, do you know what we do when they start shooting? And I'm just kind of like, we shouldn't really be having this discussion, but I was like, what do you do? And they pointed to a car that had bullet holes in it, and they said, we get behind the engine block so we won't get shot. And I was very rarely am I speechless, but I was stunned, and I started getting tears in my eyes. I was like, I don't want these kids to see me having tears in my eyes, right? And I didn't know, I was at a loss for words. I'm like, what do I say right now? Like, how do you address that? Because I don't want to normalize it for them. So I just kind of stood there, and then we changed the subject, and I thought, you wonder why these kids have such a hard time growing up when they're exposed to violence like this, from childhood. And like I said, it's across every segment of society. From your highway workers that are setting up traffic barriers on the interstate at night, and one of their guys gets hit by a car. Those guys, they experience PTSD. And all the different traumas. I mean, it's in every line of work, and for so many years, it was shunned. It was a horrible thing to admit that you had some kind of mental health issue. Well, guess what? Every time I was ever hurt at work, and I had been hurt multiple times, I blow my knee out, making an arrest. What happens? Well, the paperwork's filed, then I go to the doctor, surgery's performed, I rehab, and I come back. And does anybody say, you're a horrible person for having a knee injury? How weak are you? You should have fought through that. Nobody says that. But if you're involved in some traumatic event at work and it puts you in a bad spot mentally, then you're just supposed to bury that and not address it. Well, I don't believe in that, and I believe we should talk about it. Did this situation bother you? And I remember specific incidents with when I was in the traffic unit doing, fatal and serious crashes. There was a couple times when right towards the end when I retired, I said, how did this make you guys feel? And people look at you kind of funny because we're not used to that. And then they'll be like, yeah, man, that was horrible. And it was really neat to see that, where it just took asking the question. And then we start talking about it. And when I went home that morning from working that crash, I felt better, not only about myself because I was able to ask the question, but because the question that I asked, other people responded. So it's like baby steps, but I really see it addressing the issues is more prevalent with this younger generation. And they will experience something terrible, and they'll call you or stop by to see you, and they're like, hey, I saw this horrible thing. I think I'm going to go to a therapist. Is there anyone you recommend? And I've sat there before, and I just kind of, I'm a lot more emotional now than I ever was, and I don't worry about showing it. But I get tears in my eyes. They're like, what's wrong? And I was like, this is, like, coming from your generation, you don't understand how huge this is. This is amazing. And it's just giving you a boost to drive further and push harder to make this a thing, an acceptable thing, because they see it and they're addressing it. We never did that. And our suicide numbers show it.
So let's talk about some community resources available to first responders. If you feel comfortable reaching out to your health and wellness, health and safety officer, feel free. There's a lot of employee assistance programs you can go through that. If you do not feel comfortable doing that, there are groups out in the community that are well trained and know how to tackle first responder issues like PTSD. One of my favorites is Hello Mental Health, and it's in the Mount Auburn area, and they have multiple therapists who have years and years and years of training in dealing with this sort of thing. Another one of my favorites is Rooted Compassion, and it's in the Sharonville area, and they have immediate openings if need be. And I know Officer Chris Perry, if you're in the Cincinnati, greater Hamilton County area, that he would love to chat with you if you feel like you don't know which way to turn. And also, of course, the Anderson Clinic. We have medication management available. We can do ketamine IV infusions, and we can also do personalized TMS, which is helpful for both PTSD and concussions. Officer Perry, is there anything else that you'd like to share and let our audience know before we head out today?
I would say if you're nervous about getting help, do an honest self-assessment. What helped me was the day I looked in the mirror when I was getting ready to shave, and I looked at that person in the mirror, and I truly, and it wasn't, I wasn't delusional or anything, but I looked in the mirror and I didn't recognize the person. And like that light was kind of gone from my eye, and I wasn't proud of the person that I saw in the mirror. That prompted a really heartfelt assessment. And I sat down with pen and paper and I wrote down my positives and my negatives, and guess what side was prevailing in that list?
Yeah.
And I said, it's time. It's definitely time. This can be beaten. You have to want it. If you're working with someone like me, when I started out in this, it was very new to me, but I was going with my heart and not so much with my head, and I didn't realize that I can't want it more than the person. I will give you 100% of myself, and I'll give you 100% of myself 24 hours a day. And there's a lot of people that say things like that don't mean it. I mean that. I will be there for you 100%. I will give you my all, but you have to put the work in. It's not easy. It's hard. There's a range of emotions. Once your emotions start coming back, get yourself into therapy. If you're with a therapist, feel like it's the right fit, find another one. That's totally normal. And no therapist that I've ever spoken to, none of my friends that are therapists, get offended by that. Find what works for you. There's different methods. There's different forms of treatment. You may have to try a few, but your life is worth it.
Absolutely. Wholeheartedly.
And the another part that's really come to mind for me, it's been the rebuilding process, and I think people need to know that. So, yeah, I came out of PTSD with 6 visits. Right, you're not out of the woods by a long shot. You're out of what I would call the real danger zone, and now you have to walk that path, and you have to build your skills to relearn who you are, and it's an opportunity. It's an opportunity to build the best version of yourself. You can weed out those negative qualities that you had. You have the presence of mind and the clarity to see where you went wrong. The parts of you that you didn't like, you can change. And at the end of the road, it's amazing, because guess what? It's not the end of the road. Every time you think you're at the end of the road, something else comes up, some other opportunity where you can push yourself further and learn new things and meet with other groups of people and see how they see things. Your mind isn't closed, your mind is wide open. Like, I look at addiction way different than I ever did before, because I know education is key. You have to know what. So the thing is the question, probably one of the larger changes that have happened with me is I ask why. If someone's behaving a certain way, instead of throwing them away and saying, "Oh, this is a bad person, they're an addict, they're a junkie, whatever you want to call it," why did this happen? Nobody chose that life. Nobody chose to be a prostitute. Nobody chose to be a drug addict. Nobody grew up with that as their goal. Let's see why and do what we can to fix that situation, because that's a person. It's not. You don't throw people away. People aren't disposable. And there's a hell of a lot of people that have made fantastic comebacks.
It's important to be open, to be shining a flashlight into those dark corners, right? It's helpful to have a person that you feel safe being vulnerable with, whether that's your chief or your coworker or a therapist or a friend or a priest or a preacher or whatever, or somebody who's been through this before, right? And it's helpful to have a guide through the wilderness, and it's helpful to have lifelong interest in learning new coping skills. With that, we're going to wrap up today. For folks who are interested in what they heard and would love to learn more about first responders getting treatment for PTSD, I would love to engage in conversation. On how to reach us is www.andersonclinic.net. If you're local in the Cincinnati area, feel free to give us a call at 513-321-1753. And you can also follow us on Spotify and Apple under Psych Waves. Like and subscribe. And Officer Perry, thank you so much for your time and attention. I appreciate you, and I appreciate everything that you're doing for our community.
Likewise, thanks for the opportunity. And if anybody wants to get in contact with me, best way is email, and it's cperry, Perry, at Amberley, and it's spelled AMBERLEY, village.org, cperry at amberleyvillage.org. If anybody wants me to talk to their personnel or just get with me one-on-one, I'm always available. Just get in contact with me.
Thank you so much for making
Thanks a
yourself
lot.
available.
I appreciate it.
All right, have a great day.
Yeah, you too.